First of all, good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Miller. I have the honor of representing Winona, Houston, and Fillmore counties in the Minnesota Senate. And this year, some new opportunities for me. I was appointed Deputy Majority Leader of the Senate as well as Chairman of the Jobs and Economic Growth Committee. So very happy to be here. Our Senate Majority Leader, Paul Gazelka, sends his best. He had a scheduling conflict. So to answer your question, I think there is a strong desire for us to work together toward bipartisan agreements on the issues that we're facing here at the state. Certainly from the people that elected us, from Minnesotans, the message I'm hearing loud and clear is work together and get your work done. So that's what our focus is going to be in the Senate. And as you mentioned, we've already passed two important bills in the Senate. This is my 7th year as a member of the Minnesota Senate, and I haven't seen things move as quickly as they have this year. So the federal tax conformity, which passed with strong bipartisan support, as well as the Healthcare Relief and Access Fund. And Senator Bach has been working on these two during the interim. Senator Majority Leader Paul Gazelka, Michelle Benson was very involved in the health care bill, as well as the Speaker of the House. So you get a lot of different players working together. In addition, the governor has been very supportive of these two proposals as well. So we're looking to work together with our colleagues in both chambers, both sides of the aisle, as well as the governor's office to continue this path of getting things done.
Senator Bach, nothing but good feelings, right?
Well, my title changed. It was painful.
Yet he still finds a way to be in the middle of the table.
Yeah.
Even to Senator Bach.
Well, first, enjoy the capital, your capital. I mean, we spent $310 million, and those of you that have had a chance to take a look at it, all of those contractors and men and women of the building trades did an extraordinary job. It really is quite something. It's as close to it looked in 1905 as we could make it with current building codes and things we have to address. But it was, I can tell you, for a carpenter, the last 4 years of doing that has been a pretty fun time to be a leader for me. So once in a while, I still, when I drive up to the front of the building, kind of pinch myself that I get to work here. It's pretty amazing. So enjoy it. Enjoy the heavy lifting you have to do. There's 43 new members, and that's a big job for all of you, to those of you that have new members, to get acquainted with them and share with them what's important to you and the communities that you represent. So there's a pretty big learning curve for new people, and we really rely on people like you to come to the Capitol and educate people on issues that they really don't know anything about. So for those of us that have been around a while, your participation is very important as we try to move forward. On the issue of working together, my guess is, or intuition is, you will see a bigger rift between the House and the Senate than you will see in the Senate. The Senate has always been a little bit more of a bipartisan body. Some of that's because we have 4-year terms instead of 2-year, I think, but I think you'll see a great deal of cooperation in the Senate. Senator Gazelka and I sit next to each other on the tax committee. We're both longtime tax committee members, and you're going to like getting to know him. Paul Gazelka, he's a really good guy. Now let me tell you why. He's an Iron Ranger. So those the only thing they're going to fall in love with him. People even love Tom Rukavina, right? I mean, but Paul did. He grew up on the range. He was a Virginia Blue Devil. Grew up not that far from me, actually. So we kind of have a natural kinship, and I think for leaders to have that is very, very helpful. And he is just a really good guy. So you're going to enjoy getting to know him. He is going to work very hard at being bipartisan. When you hear him say that, I think he sincerely means that. Some of that is just because that's who he is. The rest of it is the fact that I have 33 members, he has 34. And it takes 34 votes to pass a bill. So there are going to be plenty of occasions where we're going to be working bipartisanly to get things done, because we all have somebody on just about every issue that doesn't agree with the majority, that think they might want to be the maverick. So you'll see, I think, a lot of bipartisan votes. The first one's likely to be on the Real ID bill. that we're going to move through. I think the Republican caucus probably doesn't have enough votes to pass that, so I think we'll probably have some common ground on that. So I'm, even though I'd rather still be on the third floor than the second floor, I think you'll be pretty proud of the way the Senate handles the session. Not as sure about the House. I'm a former House member, and it gets harder over there. I mean, in Kurt Doug's defense, he's got twice as many people to deal with, right? And I guarantee you, they're already running scared from the 2018 election. And that's the nature of two-year terms. So it's just a lot harder over there. So we'll, in the Senate, try to drive as sensible solutions as we can to put as much stability back in our communities as we can in this very uncertain time in Washington, D.C., and the instability that this is all creating for people. But thanks again for all of you participating, helping bring along new people that don't know kind of what the priorities maybe are back in your communities.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, and excuse me if I remain seated. I had knee replacement surgery back in November, and it's just easier to keep sitting. But once I finally start moving, you'll notice we limp for a while until it loosens up, and then I can walk. Pleased to be here today. Thank you for all the work you do for our cities. I don't know about some of the comments Senator Bach was making about the House. You may not know this, but we join together now before the sessions and join arms and march in singing Kumbaya. We get along so well. But, there may be some moments where there's a little dissension. Possibly within our caucus, but between the two caucuses as well. I'm pleased that we were able to get a couple of bills done quickly, important bills. The schedule for the rest of the way, I hope that we can keep moving along and do things in a timely fashion. And we have to work together. I think when one caucus just tries to jam everything through, it leads to bad endings. And I certainly am hopeful that we can work together and get good things done for the people of Minnesota. I chair, as has been noted, the Capital Investment Committee. And that's a committee that one side can't pass alone unless they have a super majority, and we don't. So we have probably, after the special election, 77 Republicans. It takes 81 votes to pass a bonding bill. And you could say that means I just have to get 4 Democrats to vote for it. Well, that's if you are convinced that I've got all 77 Republicans, which probably will not be the case. So there's a lot of negotiating that's involved in trying to put together a bonding bill, which has things that are important to you in it. Things like the PFA, the water legislation, streets, money for streets, and all of these things. I'm certainly hopeful that we do get a bonding bill done this year, and also one next year, because we are a biennium behind. We didn't get one. Well, we did get one done until the Senate screwed it up. But anyway.
What did I tell you?
And it didn't become law. But there were a lot of good things in that bill. It was very heavy on infrastructure. The bill that we put together this next time also should be heavy, and will be heavy, I'm sure, on the infrastructure needs, the local roads and bridges, the PFA water funding. We've got, I think, we're looking at like about 150 some million in water, which is far more than we normally do. We normally do like 30, 40 million. So we're going to be making a big investment, and that means we go down farther on the list, and more of you will be helped with these projects. In terms of bipartisanship, it certainly is important, as I said before, that we work together. And the capital project is an excellent example of what can be done to do something good when you are just trying to work together and do the best you can do. Senator Bach and I we're working together on some things with that. We did a very good job of helping the Senate to come along. And we've had last year Senator Bach and I worked on the civics legislation together. And this year we each have an education bill that we're trying to get through that will help out our smaller districts in the state of Minnesota. So with that, look forward to your questions and comments and whatever else Bradley has in mind.
Yeah, all right, so back to Senator Miller. So as you guys know, hopefully, should, if we've been doing our job, local government aid is our highest priority, right? We've gone 2 years without a tax bill, which is very unusual. 2 years without a tax bill, especially in a case where it hasn't been vetoed by a governor. It just hasn't, well, I guess this last one you could say was, so. But it's very unusual, and so what do you guys think? Because my belief is that a tax bill could be the hardest thing to pass this session. I mean, it's not a have-to-have in terms of keeping the lights on in the state. A lot of communities, for a lot of various reasons, are counting on it. What do you guys think is the prospects of a tax bill passing this session, and more importantly, a tax bill that has a local government aid increase in it?
What's local government? Just kidding, everyone, just kidding. My father was the mayor of the city of Winona for 16 years, so I'm very familiar with local government aid and a big proponent of local government aid. As Bradley mentioned, there was a $20 million increase in local government aid in last year's tax bill. That tax bill did ultimately pass the legislature with strong bipartisan support, but was vetoed by Governor Dayton. There was a drafting error in the language, and unfortunately, the governor and the legislature couldn't come together on a special session. So we have our opinions on that, but that was last year. We're looking forward. I'm optimistic that we'll see a tax bill pass this year. I think there's a strong desire by both chambers, by both parties, to pass a tax bill. And I think, at least in the Senate, you'll see a tax bill that has a lot of relief, not only for cities and counties, but for small businesses, farmers, middle, low-income families, college students. My hope is that we see something similar to what we had last year, but perhaps a little bit larger to provide more relief to Minnesotans.
Yeah.
Well, I often say it's just math, right? I mean, we've got about $1.4 billion available to be spent. The bonding bill that Senator Sendra moved out of committee last week has $200 million in cash in it. So now you have 1.2. If we did the governor's tax bill, which is about 300 million, and I've heard the Republican caucuses say they think that's too skinny, but even if you did the governor's bill, you go from 1.4, 1.2 down to 900 million. If you take a look at the transportation bill that's floating around that I think is likely to happen, that's about 300 million a year, so that's 600 million. So you take that off of 900, now you're down to 300 million left. And then Senator Gazelka feels really strongly about doing something with this individual health insurance market. We've got some significant problems there with these skyrocketing premiums for these 125,000 people that don't get the federal tax credit. That reinsurance plan that people are looking at, if we don't create some kind of fees or assessments to pay for it, that's about 600 million. So now you're underwater and you haven't done anything with any of the spending committees, nothing for K-12, nothing for higher ed, nothing for corrections, I mean, all the other spending bills. So it's going to be a matter of what the priorities are. I can tell you for me, I really want to get something done on transportation. And there has not been an appetite at the legislature to do anything with the gas tax or license tabs. So I think the more likely outcome is we probably use some of that $1.4 billion surplus. But getting a large tax bill and a transportation bill is going to be pretty hard because it's just the math. And what I don't want to do in a tax bill, I could lay out some parameters, is pass things and just kind of delay their implementation out into the tails so that the costs of them build over time. You know, I went through those plenty years when we managed deficits for more than a decade, and it was tough. And we used every kind of accounting gimmick we could to keep the state's budget in balance, and those of you that receive local government aid bear part of the brunt of that. So, you know, in 2013 we came along and we fixed the state budget, and now it's structurally balanced going forward. I think we have a responsibility to maintain that structural balance going forward. So it's real easy to delay things in a tax bill and push the costs out into the future, but we run the risk of creating deficits again for future legislatures to manage. So I guess I would ask my friends on the other side of the aisle to be careful with the tax bill because there was a story in December in USA Today about, and it listed the best run states in the country on a fiscal basis as far as fiscal management. North Dakota was first. Minnesota was considered the second best fiscally run state in the country. Because of the budget reserve that we've built up and an automatic mechanism to increase it as a percentage of the state budget, and we don't carry a lot of debt. Minnesota's got a lot of things going for it. So I'm going to urge caution on that, and I guess the longer you've been around here, the more you kind of worry about what what you're leaving to the next legislature to manage. So the tax bill is going to probably be a little skinnier than people want it to be. My only caution is let's not get too reckless out in the tails so that we can't invest in things that are important, you know, in the next biennium and one beyond that.
Representative Erdahl, tax bill and local government aid.
You're driving them out.
I'm not the one with the microphone.
Oh, that was the center box. Well, first of all, and I should have said this before, welcome to my home. I live in room 315 here. And I do bring you greetings from the speaker, who was otherwise occupied, otherwise he would have been here. You know, certainly the tax bill is very important to the House Republican caucus. And, you know, when you look at the vote, it passed about 90% of the House. So the House DFL caucus also looked very kindly on the tax bill. But, you know, some changes are going to have to be made. It is a different year, different needs. And it's a real trick, you know, balancing the state budget. And as the senator noted, you know, the demands in health and human services and in education continue to grow as with others, but those are the two biggest. And we will be addressing those things. As you probably know, other than, or well, not like the national government, but we do have to have a balanced budget at each year, and so that's what we're working to get to. Now, in terms of local government aid and some of your other concerns, I had a conversation last night with the tax chair, Representative Greg Davids, the name you know, the name you trust. That's what I told him to say.
He's a former mayor.
But Representative Davids is going to be hearing a bill shortly, and I can't promise that this will be the amount that it winds up, but at $45 million for LGA, which I think would be a good amount for you. And I want you to know that the House Republican caucus has been very insistent with our leadership, you know, through the last biennium and now into this one, that the local government aid is important to the cities that represent, and cities all across the state of Minnesota, and we want to make sure that that you are fairly taking care of the tax bill. So hopefully our concerns will be met. We'll have if not 45 million, at least a good amount of money for LGA in the tax bill. But I have one provision myself that I have in the tax bill related to education, which is to provide a tax credit for teachers who are getting master's degrees in the field that they are teaching. You may not be aware of this, but most teachers in Minnesota who get a master's degree don't get it in what they're teaching. And I'm trying to find a way to incentivize teachers to actually, if you're a math teacher, get a master's in math.
All right, thank you. Back to Senator Miller. Bonding bill. So in the Senate, Senator Senjum has dusted off the end of session bill from last year, and we certainly don't need to relitigate where it got lost between traveling from the Senate over to the House at the very end of session, maybe 12:01 on
Are you sure I can provide more detail?
No. I think it's important to look forward, but you know, we have heard varying things, I think, about whether or not some legislators think it's appropriate to even do a big bonding bill this year to sort of make up for the fact that there wasn't one last biennium. You know, Senator Senjum seems to be moving forward, dusting off a bill, moved it through committee. What is it going to take to get done? Is that something, I mean, to me, that seems almost more realistic than a tax bill, partially because of the math that Senator Bach pointed out. But is a bonding bill, a sizable bonding bill, maybe, you know, $900 million, $1 billion, is that doable this year?
Well, we have the chair of the bonding committee from the House, so I think I'll certainly defer to him and some additional comments from Chair Erdahl. But I think what Senator Senjum's trying to accomplish is, hey, we had a bonding bill that we worked extremely hard on putting together last year. And it's not easy to put a bonding bill together. It's very complicated. You need a supermajority of votes to pass it, so you're going to need bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate, more bipartisan support in the Senate because of the 34-33 majority. So I think what Senator Senjum's trying to accomplish is, hey, we put all this work and effort into last year's bonding bill that had that bipartisan support, so let's put that bill forward. Otherwise, what happens is generally the Senate or the legislature will pass a bonding bill in the even numbered year. So that would be 2018. 2017, this session, is generally a budget year. And then the bonding committees will go on tours in the fall of the odd number years. So we'll go on tours this fall to look at projects for the next bonding bill. So if we want to pass a bonding bill in 2017, which I believe there's a desire to do so, I don't know if there's there, but I know there's a desire from some of us to do that. I think Senator Senjum's approach is a good approach to get that done.
Senator Bach, you're going to have to, some of your folks are going to have to vote for it if it's going to happen.
Well, let me first say there's not much the Senate can do about it. The Constitution requires that bills that put the state in debt have to originate in the House. So unless the House sends the Senate a bill, there's really no conversation about it. Senator Senjum is making his best effort to assemble a bill. I don't think we're off to a very good start, and that's because I have a little more information than he has. He put together a version of what was taken up the last night of the session. What he should have put together, and I'm not talking behind his back because I told him this, is over the course of the summer and the fall, the governor and the speaker and I negotiated what was going to be the special session bill. And it addressed some of the concerns the governor had for things that were important to him that were left out of the bill the last night of session last year. Things like a building for the University of Minnesota medical campus that really people agree we should do, but it's not in that last night of session bill. So what I'd hope the starting place for us would be is let's start with where the speaker and I and the governor have an agreement on a bill. And unfortunately, we're not starting there in the Senate. I've expressed that to Senator Senjum. So I don't think what we've currently got in front of us in the Senate is probably going to pass. So there's more work needs to be done on it. But I mean, I hope we can get there. But it is going to. I do think if the House sends us a bill, the Senate's going to respond. And I think we probably could get to a deal. So the question is going to be whether the House can find a way to send us a bill to work, because really the priority of the session is the budget, it really is. You know, there's work left over from last year, but we've got to get a 2-year budget put together. So if you see something on a bonding bill, it's likely to be much later in the session, I would think.
Chair Riddle, it's all in your hands.
Well, thank you. And the House being a much more deliberative body. Slowly to get this out. Well, first of all, should we get a bill done this year? And as I said, Elizabeth said, we didn't do a bill the last biennium because of whatever happened at the end of session. And so the question becomes, should we do one? This is not a bonding year. Next year is the traditional bonding year. My position is this. We didn't do a bill when we were supposed to have got a bill done. So now we should do one this year. We should do it not just because we didn't do it last time, but because our infrastructure is crumbling. There is a huge need that is only getting larger, and the interest rates are going to go up. And if we don't do it, everything is just going to cost more. And so we need to find a way to do this bill this year. Now, as Senator Bach indicated, the bill that passed at the end of last session is, well, kind of passed. There are things that need to be changed, need to be tweaked in it. So he's right that Senator Sengen's bill, even if it passed the Senate, well, there would have to be all kinds of changes made to it. There are projects in there that no longer need to be done. And so it's a good place to start, a good place to look at, as is the special session bill that's being negotiated. And I would believe that the bill that we do put together in the House will largely have elements of what was done before, at least in the infrastructure categories, in the higher education, the University of Minnesota, those types of components of the bill. So I guess I think we're going to get a bill done. I think we should get a bill done. It will be largely like we had before, but there will be some differences, and it likely will be a little bit smaller than it was before. The governor's at 1.5 billion. The House is, or the Senate is just under $1 billion right now with the Senate bill. And I'm guessing that when the go-ahead is given, we will come up with something that's a little less than that. Of course, then you go to conference committee to see what happens. But that's kind of how I think things are likely to play out. At least I hope so. And we have to get these things done because I know it's important to all of you. You know, the BDPI and all of these things that are in there have a lot of impact on local government, and we need to find a way to get this done. But I do also believe that from our standpoint, it's going to be a little bit later in the session. I just hope that we're not standing on the floor on May 21st or 22nd trying to get this done. But that's the end of session, and it gets way too chaotic. As chair of the Legacy Committee, I've twice been the last man standing, and time runs out, and then I have to come in and do it again in special session, and we don't want to do that.
So I did promise Senator Miller that we'd get him off to his committee that he needs to chair here, but I wanted to also give him an opportunity to make maybe a couple of closing thoughts. And Senator Bach and Representative Erdahl, if you've got a couple more minutes, I'm sure folks would love to chat.
Sure, just real quickly, thank you for having us here as a panel, but most importantly, thank you for everything that you do in our communities throughout the state. We appreciate your leadership, and we look forward to continuing to partner with you as we move through this legislative session. Please continue to communicate with your legislators, and we'll do our best to work together with you to get good things done for our cities and our counties and the state of Minnesota. So thank you so much.
You guys want to take a couple of questions?
Oh, boy.
Oh, we got one right here.
You guys touched on it a little bit in the beginning. They touched on this subject that's kind of bothered me for many years, as far as the elections are concerned, and it's a 2-year cycle for the representatives, where they get elected and they're virtually turn around and trying to get reelected again. And so, has anybody ever given a thought of going to a 4-year term and maybe, or a 3-year term or something to extend that, so you're not quite so focused on getting reelected and you can focus more on what you're supposed to be here to focus on?
So the question I'll restate has to do with the 2-year terms in the House sort of drive perhaps maybe more political thinking than policy thinking, since folks are already looking towards their next election. Has there ever been any discussion about changing that?
Yeah, there's been discussion about it. I mean, I've been running for 15 years. You're right, it doesn't stop. But, and then there have been discussions of legislation. And by the way, in the public, I hear that a lot from people. Why don't you have a 4-year term? You're always running. But it's never going to change. It's in the Constitution. If we were to vote to change it, I'm sure the concern of many legislators would be that the public would be outraged that we are somehow trying to insulate ourselves from them, or stay in office forever. It's kind of like a pay raise.
Well, there has been a bill floating around for a number of years. Senator Tomassoni, I know, introduced it a couple times to go to 6 years for the Senate, 4 for the House, and stagger them so that part of the Senate's up every 2 years, part of the House is up every 2 years, stagger the terms. Actually, it would kind of create some stability. You wouldn't have kind of wild swings probably with the volatility of politics these days. But it really has never gotten any traction. And it does take a constitutional change, so people would have to vote for it. There is, based on what happened in 2012 with the 2 amendments that were on the ballot in 12 and how they impacted the election, there's some real reluctance at the legislature to put things on the ballot for fear of how it might drive turnout, what create some kind of additional wave on the part of the public. So getting things on the ballot is, I think, more difficult than it previously has been. I tell you what we could do, that I believe we should do, and I've had the bill several times, but I just can't find any support for it. I think our legislature's too big. And that is just a statutory change. That it could be made smaller just statutorily, and I've actually got a bill that does that, but I haven't been able to find support for it. We have the largest state house or the largest Senate in the country at 67 people, the largest. Doesn't need to be that big anymore, not with the technology that we have. We're not coming in on horses anymore, right? But can't seem to find support for it. But I think a smaller body would help, and I would actually support getting away from 2-year elections also, but I think that's more problematic, and it's constitutional.
Another question? Yep.
Flushable wipes, we talked to Representative Erdahl this morning about that. So is that going to come back up? I know it cost us $200,000 last year.
John, you want to say more about the issue for these guys?
We had a clog in our wastewater treatment, a main at our wastewater treatment plant last February. We had to dig up the wastewater treatment plant input back in February to the tune of $200,000. They had to put a bypass in, and they pulled the valve with the plug that had the diapers and the flushable wipes and all that kind of stuff all over it. That passed. That was in the Senate last year. It would have, and I think it got cut out of the omnibus bill last year.
So there's labeling legislation on this issue that was floating around that the MPCA was pushing, that it's been a huge issue, and there's actually lawsuits aimed at these companies and that sort of thing. Is that something that could get done this year?
And we had a second clog in October. After that had been changed out, they were able to open and shut the valve and get it to break loose. But it also affects our lift stations. It's pretty costly.
I'm not aware of any bill in the House, so are you promoting any?
We don't have anything that we're working on, or Liz might know actually.
My understanding is the MPCA is bringing forward a bill. It is basically where it was sort of at the end of last session. It never made it into any of the omnibus bills. They're supposed to be introducing in the next week or so. I just talked to Greta about it earlier this week. It's supposed to be happening again. CGMC will be supporting it along with the league and MMUA. We just hope we can get some traction on it. As Councilmember Loeffler is pointing out, it's a huge issue for a lot of our cities because of the expense. So we'd love support from both parties and both houses.
Well, if there is a bill, Rod, I'm sure that there will be a House member eager to take it over.
Senator Bach, you want to say anything about that?
The big joke in the legislature is when the legislature's in session, nobody's property is safe. So I suspect there'll probably be a bill. Seems to make some sense to me. It's too bad the manufacturers can't figure something out. I'm sure most people that use those don't know the hazard that they present. Those of us that have on-site sewer systems probably are more sensitive to that than people that don't, but it seems like it's something the manufacturer should have been ahead of long before now. But we'll see what comes forward. But it seems to make sense. But generally, local governments don't like when the state puts mandates on, so we're always a little bit sensitive about that local control issue also.
All right, so final question. What is your greatest hope for, other than $45.5 million for local government aid, what is your greatest hope for session outcome?
To get done on time, to have a balanced budget, and to get a bonding bill done. And with that, you guys are great. And with that, I'd like to stay around and talk a little bit, but I have the mayor of Darwin in my office at 1 o'clock, and since he represents the biggest ball of twine made by one man, I have to get there.
Well, I do think getting done on time is really important. You look at Washington, D.C., and I often think it's so dysfunctional, who would ever run for Congress, right? I mean, I passed up my chance when Jim Oberstar got beat. And I thought, really? Why would I go there? And I think that's how most people think of Washington, D.C. And I really don't want them to start thinking that way about St. Paul, that our state government can't work and get the work done. And I think, every time you go past the constitutional deadline and have special sessions or shutdowns, I think you undermine some public confidence that their state government can work. And I think the longer you're around, the more sensitive you are to that, kind of what shape are you leaving the institution in the eyes of the public. So I think it's pretty important. On a personal note, Dean Erdahl's going to carry the bill in the House for me. I've got a bill that puts some additional money on the school formula for small schools, for schools with less than 1,500 pupils. We have to do something with what's going on in our rural schools. We are never going to attract economic development to our rural communities if we don't have good K-12 infrastructure. And we're losing curriculum. We're just losing curriculum because we don't have the pupil units to sustain it, and the state pays based on pupil units. So I'm going to dig in really hard. The good news in the Senate is Senator Gazelka is a co-author on the bill with me. So I'm hopeful in the Senate side. I've met with the Speaker about it. And for those of us that have been in rural communities, the post office is important infrastructure and part of the identity of our community. But that school, without it, that community loses its identity. And those of you that are in districts that have gone through those kind of consolidations won't know the impact that has on your community and on potential economic development. So just kind of on a personal note, I really am hoping at the end of the day here we've got some additional money on the formula for small schools.
All right, Senator Bach, thank you so much for being here.